Good morning, everybody. We are in the 37th session of Business Research Methods, Unit 4. The topic is data collection and processing. Today in session 37, we are going to talk about the types of data, primary and secondary data. So we all know that data is, the meaning of the word data is, in data it is singular, data is plural. Data is any information that has been collected, generated, observed or created to validate original research findings. Here we are having a set of data collection sources and methods. So here we are having in data there are two types, primary and secondary. And primary data is basically data that is generated for the first time, and it is project specific and it is collected for a specific purpose. The genuineness, the relevancy and pertinency of the data is very high. The implication in terms of cost, effort, time and involvement is also very high. So primary data is usually collected through methods like observation, questionnaire, interviews, surveys, experimentation, etc. Now we come to what is secondary data. Secondary data is data which has already been collected and which has already been published in a particular format, and which is accessible or available to anybody. Here the information collected is contextual and what is primary to one person or what is original data to one researcher will be secondary or historical to other researchers. So in secondary data sources we are having two, internal and external. Internal sources of secondary data is within the sources existing within the company itself, which is at hand. It is basically fully processed or any data which needs further analysis. External sources are of course published data, electronic databases like internet and search engines, and all syndicate sources like government and commerce bodies, scientific bodies. Next we are going to go to the primary data. So as we already spoke about what is primary data, we will now go to the types of study done based on primary data. So the type of studies done on primary data basically would be: 1, you have structured study, 2, non-structured study, 3, projective techniques, and 4, depth interviews. So structured study would be when primary data is basically collected for a specific purpose. The respondents would be asked a number of questions which is planned in advance, which has a particular sequence and a particular logic, and which has answers, questions based where answers would be yes or no. Non-structured techniques of studies basically would be where the interview do not use any particular set of questions, but the interviewer asks certain open-ended questions based on specific research topic, and they let the interview flow or the conversation flow, and they collect information from the conversation. Next we have projective techniques. So projective techniques basically is where a respondent, that is an interviewee, the person who is giving the information or who is being interviewed, is asked to explain an ambiguous situation, and the interviewer basically studies the answer, and to study in terms of the personality, the attitudes of the respondent as he is giving his answer regarding certain questions. Next, we have the depth interview. The depth interview is basically an attempt to get the respondent to talk openly on his subject of interest, and instead of going in for a set structured questionnaire, certain various probes, certain questions where the questions lead to the respondent explaining more and going deeper into the subject. So this type of interview is depth interview. The objective of depth interview is basically for getting a deeper insight into specific decisions. So these are the types of study done, and similarly you have the particular type of questions prepared. Next, we are going into the modes of primary data collection. So one, we are having observation of subjects, 2, experimentation, and 3, questionnaire. So primary data can be collected through any of these methods. Next, the primary data collection procedure involves certain steps. One, you have to plan the study. Then you must decide on the particular mode of data collection, which will depend upon what you are trying to validate in your research, and deciding upon the sample, choosing the sample, the size of the sample, finding out which is your target sample, and after collecting the data, editing your primary data. Next, we go to what is secondary data. So secondary data is information which is not topic or research specific. It is contextual to a particular topic, and it is gathered and documented by some other researcher or research agency, and it can be both published and unpublished data. The primary and original data for one researcher can be secondary and historical data for another researcher. So types of secondary data. So secondary data can be from your internal sources. So what are the sources for your internal secondary data? Company records, employee records, sales data, financial records, sales report, performance appraisal records, productivity records, schedules, even salespeople call records. These are all internal. Next, we are having what are the external sources of secondary data. So you have primarily the internet, books, journals, newspapers, statistical and government reports, publications of advertisements, trade and association directories. These are all major sources of secondary data. Thank you.